On April 5, 1909, the residents of Phoenix, Arizona, woke up to a headline that should have changed the world forever. The Phoenix Gazette ran a front-page story with the title, "Explorations in Grand Canyon." The subtitle was even more shocking, "Mysteries of Immense Rich Cavern Being Brought to Light," and then, "Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from Orient." The article detailed the discovery of a massive underground citadel carved deep into the rock of the Grand Canyon. It wasn't a small cave with a few arrowheads. It was a metropolis capable of housing 50,000 people. And the artifacts inside were not Native American. They were Egyptian, or perhaps Tibetan. They described mummies wrapped in bark fabric, statues of idols sitting cross-legged, and copper tools hardened like steel. But if you go to the Grand Canyon National Park today and ask the rangers about this cave, they will tell you it does not exist. They will tell you the article was a hoax, a piece of yellow journalism to sell papers. But if it was a hoax, why are vast areas of the Grand Canyon declared off-limits to hikers and pilots? Why is the airspace over this specific region restricted? And why are the monuments there named after Egyptian gods? Today, we are going to reopen the cold case of the Grand Canyon Egyptian city. We are going to trace the steps of the explorer G.E. Kinkaid, the man who claimed to find the entrance. We will analyze the denial of the Smithsonian Institution and their history of suppressing inconvenient artifacts. And we will ask, did a fleet of Egyptian or Asian refugees cross the Pacific thousands of years before Columbus? To understand the discovery, we have to look at the man. G.E. Kinkaid was an explorer and a hunter. He had spent 30 years of his life working for the Smithsonian Institution, collecting specimens. In 1908, he was traveling down the Colorado River alone in a wooden boat, looking for mineral deposits. About 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon, he saw something on the canyon wall. Sedimentary stains on the rock formation suggested a man-made path. He beached his boat and began to climb. It was a difficult ascent, nearly 2,000 feet above the riverbed. But behind a projection of rock, hidden from view from the water, he found the mouth of a cave. The entrance was almost perfectly circular, but it was blocked by debris and vegetation, suggesting it hadn't been used for centuries. Kinkaid entered with a lantern. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't a natural cavern. The walls were chiseled, the floor was smoothed. He walked down a main passageway that was 12 feet wide, carved with the precision of modern engineers. About 100 feet in, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber, the Rotunda, radiating with smaller hallways like the spokes of a wheel. Kinkaid knew he had found something monumental. He didn't loot it. He didn't tell the press immediately. He sent a message to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. According to the article, the Smithsonian dispatched a Professor S.A. Jordan to lead a full expedition. They brought equipment, lights, and a team of archaeologists to document the site. The Phoenix Gazette article is filled with specific details from their report. They describe finding a cross hall, several hundred feet long, containing an idol. The idol sat cross-legged, holding a lotus flower in each hand. The face was Oriental. The archaeologists thought it looked like Buddha, but the craftsmanship suggested ancient Egypt. Surrounding the idol were smaller statues, some beautiful, some distorted and crooked, perhaps representing good and evil. But the most disturbing discovery was the crypt. Deep inside the complex, they found a chamber filled with mummies. These were not buried in the ground, they were placed in tiers cut into the rock wall. Kinkaid noted a strange detail. All the mummies examined were male. There were no women and no children. This suggested it was a barracks for warriors or a monastery for priests. The bodies were wrapped in a bark fabric unknown to the region and covered in clay urns. Near the bodies were copper tools, but this copper was harder than steel, a lost metallurgical technology. They found urns and cups made of gold and enamelwork that looked Egyptian. And carved into the rock above the doorways were hieroglyphs, symbols that Kinkaid could not read, but knew were not Aztec or Hopi. This discovery would prove diffusionism, the theory that ancient civilizations traveled the oceans and shared knowledge. It would destroy the narrative of isolationism that the Smithsonian protected. So, what happened? After the article was published on April 5, 1909, the story vanished. Total silence. No follow-up articles, no photos released, no museum exhibit. When researchers began asking questions in the later 20th century, the Smithsonian gave a standard reply. We have no record of an explorer named G.E. Kinkaid, nor a Professor S.A. Jordan. We have no record of any Egyptian artifacts in North America. They erased the men, just like they erased the reports of the giants we discussed in previous videos. But researchers dug into the archives. They found records of a G.E. Kinkaid working in Lewiston, Idaho. They found mention of a S.A. Jordan in field reports from the era. The men existed. The newspaper article exists. You can find it in the Library of Congress archives today. So, where is the cave? The Grand Canyon is massive. It is 277 miles long and over a mile deep. Most of it is unexplored wilderness, but there is a specific area that draws suspicion. Look at the names of the rock formations in the Grand Canyon. The Tower of Set, the Temple of Ra, the Horus Temple, the Osiris Temple, the Isis Temple, the Cheops Pyramid. Why did the early explorers name every major peak after Egyptian gods? The official story is that the explorers just liked exotic names. But isn't it a strange coincidence that the place rumored to hold an Egyptian city is covered in Egyptian names? The area around the Isis Temple and the Tower of Set is arguably the most restricted terrain in the park. Hikers are forbidden from going off-trail in these specific zones. There are reports of black unmarked helicopters patrolling these canyons. Hikers who have attempted to climb near these formations report being intercepted by armed rangers and forced to turn back. Why so much security for a pile of rocks? In the 1990s, a hiker named John claimed to have found a cave entrance near the Isis Temple. He said the entrance was camouflaged with concrete that had been painted to look like the surrounding rock. He claimed to see unnatural, perfectly circular holes drilled into the cliff face. These align with the ventilation shafts Kinkaid described in the 1909 article. Kinkaid said the air in the cavern was surprisingly fresh, suggesting a sophisticated air circulation system. Let's look at the Hopi legend. The Hopi Indians have lived in this region for thousands of years. Their origin story says that their ancestors emerged from the Underworld through a tunnel called the Sipapu. They say they were led by the ant people, who saved them from a cataclysm of fire on the surface. The Hopi elders speak of a lost city in the canyon. They consider it sacred ground. When the article describes the Oriental look of the idols, it matches the Hopi description of the ant people. Could the Egyptian city actually be the Sipapu, the point of emergence? If Kinkaid found it, he didn't find a tomb. He found a bunker, a massive underground shelter built to survive a solar flare or a pole shift. This connects back to the Adam and Eve story and the cataclysm cycles. If an advanced civilization knew the fire was coming, they would go underground. They would build a city in the rock. The artifacts suggest a link between Egypt and the Americas that defies the timeline. We see pyramids in Egypt. We see pyramids in Mexico. We see pyramids in Indonesia. We are told they developed independently. But the Grand Canyon City suggests they were connected by a global maritime network. Perhaps the Grand Canyon was a colony, an outpost for mining gold or copper. Kinkaid mentioned finding gray metal that resembled platinum. Or perhaps it was a refugee camp for the survivors of Atlantis. When the Eye of the Sahara was destroyed, did the ships sail west to America? The Smithsonian was founded in 1846. By 1909, it was under the control of the Powell Doctrine. John Wesley Powell, the director, believed that Native Americans were primitive savages who had been here for a short time. Any evidence of advanced metallurgy, writing, or connection to the Old World was considered heresy. It threatened the manifest destiny narrative. If there were Egyptians here 3,000 years ago, who owns the land? So, the artifacts were likely crated up and shipped to Washington. They were put in the same warehouse as the giant skeletons and the out-of-place artifacts, the warehouse of forgotten history. Rumors persist that some of these artifacts were dumped in the Atlantic Ocean to destroy the evidence forever. But the cave is still there. You cannot dump a city into the ocean. Kinkaid said the entrance was 30 feet down from the sheer face of the cliff. It is nearly impossible to see from above or below unless you know exactly where to look. With modern drone technology and LiDAR, we could find it in a day. Why hasn't anyone done it? Because flying a drone in the Grand Canyon is a federal crime punishable by prison time. The no-fly zone over the canyon is strictly enforced. Is it to protect the tourists from noise, or is it to protect the secret? There is another fascinating detail in the article. Kinkaid describes the granaries in the cave, massive storehouses for food. He says they were designed like the grain silos of the Nile. Why would you need to store that much food in a remote canyon? Unless you were preparing for a long siege, or a long winter. The nuclear winter that follows a comet impact or a supervolcano eruption. The city was a survival ark. The mummies were the ones who didn't make it, or perhaps the revered leaders who led them there. If this city is real, it rewrites the history of the Americas. It implies that the Nile Valley civilization extended its reach across the globe. It explains why the Maya and the Egyptians had such similar cosmologies, calendars, and obsession with the stars. They were branches of the same tree, and the trunk of that tree is hidden in a prohibited cave in Arizona. Critics say, if there were 50,000 people, where is the trash? Where are the fields? The canyon has eroded over thousands of years. The river has risen and fallen. Evidence on the surface would be washed away. But the underground remains. Some conspiracy theorists believe the site is still active. They claim the military uses the ancient tunnels as a base today. Witnesses have reported hearing low-frequency hums emanating from the ground near the Isis temple. Is the government using the pre-existing infrastructure of the ancients? It would make sense. Why build a new bunker when you have a city carved into solid granite? The Grand Canyon cover-up is one of the most blatant examples of institutional suppression. We have the newspaper. We have the names. We have the specific location. But we are told to close our eyes. The forbidden antiquity isn't just in faraway lands like Egypt or Iraq. It is right here in the American Southwest. What if the gold of the Grand Canyon wasn't the metal? What if the real treasure was the library of knowledge they brought with them? Kinkaid mentioned tablets engraved with hieroglyphs. If those tablets contained the history of the pre-flood world, they would be more valuable than the gold. Perhaps they contained the same data as the Emerald Tablets or the Book of Enoch. The Smithsonian's job is to maintain the status quo, to keep the timeline linear and simple. An Egyptian city in Arizona complicates everything. It opens the door to giants, to Atlantis, to advanced ancient technology. It opens the door to the truth. G.E. Kinkaid died a poor man. He never got rich from his discovery. But he left us a map in the form of a news story. A story that refuses to die, no matter how many times they deny it. What do you think? Did Kinkaid invent the whole story to sell papers? Or did he stumble upon the greatest archaeological find in North American history? Why is the area around the Isis temple restricted? And why did the Smithsonian deny the existence of their own employee? Tell me your theory in the comments. Do you think the ant people of the Hopi legend were actually Egyptians hiding in the caves? We have explored the underground cities. Now we need to understand how they built them. How did they cut the rock with such precision? How did they move the stones? In the next video, we are going to look at acoustic levitation. We are going to investigate the theory that the ancients used sound frequencies to defeat gravity. From the trumpets of Jericho to the Tibetan monks lifting stones with drums. Did they sing the stones into place? You need to be subscribed, because we are going to rediscover the lost science of sound.